Welcome to the Yellow Submarine. Today, we're going to dive deep into George Harrison's ocean life. We'll get to explore the unknown facts about his life, but first, let's get a quick overview of his life. George Harrison was born in Liverpool, England on February 25, 1943. Harold Harrison was the son of a retired sailor who later worked as a bus driver. George Harrison, at the age of 12, enrolled in the Liverpool Institute for Boys, where he met Paul McCartney, who later introduced him to John Lennon, and thus became a member of the QuarryMen, a group that was renamed the Beatles after changing its name several times. The guitarist and vital member of the Beatles was always more at ease away from the cameras and spotlights, which he repeatedly stated stressed him and, along with the thousands of screaming fans, took a good part of his nervous system away. However, the so-called quiet Beatle was nothing of the sort. He preferred to get away from the nonsense and step aside so that Paul and John could unleash their enormous egos on stage and in the recording studios. It is well known that George frequently passed the guitar to Paul, not because he couldn't handle the job, but to avoid arguing over nonsense. Lennon and McCartney never attempted to collaborate with him, instead of ignoring him, which caused the musician to withdraw over time. Ironically, Harrison refused to be hired by the band, a role that his peers had almost taken for granted, until, at the end of his career, after 10 years together, finally, they began to consider him on par with them. There is a contradiction in the English musician's personality. Despite appearing calm and withdrawn during press conferences with the Beatles, his closest friends say that he is very talkative when close to the people he treats. These and other facts may change your opinion of George Harrison. Before we go any further, please click the like button to show your support for this video and subscribe to our channel to see more videos about the Beatles. Here are the top 10 unknown facts about George Harrison. Number 1. From being an electrician to touring with the Beatles. After graduating from high school in 1959, Harrison pursued his musical interests alongside an apprenticeship as an electrician. This role eventually allowed the guitarist to specialize in equipment repair and sound experimentation. Before the Beatles, Paul and John had the band the QuarryMen, and the former recommended his friend Harrison for the group on several occasions, though he was slow to do so because Lennon thought Harrison was too young to join the band. Even though he was not a virtuoso guitarist at the time, he improved in fluidity and creativity over time. At 17, Harrison was already embarking on a lengthy tour with the Beatles in Germany, performing in clubs frequented by sailors and drifters. As word spread about the Liverpool band's presence, they began to attract dozens of university students as an audience. Number 2. He died in a McCartney residence. Harrison's lung cancer returned with a vengeance in 2001, with 2 brain metastases. Despite aggressive treatment in Switzerland and New York, doctors diagnosed him with terminal cancer that could only be treated with palliative care. George convened a meeting with Paul and Ringo to say his final goodbyes in peace, and he did the same with his sister Louise, with whom he had previously clashed. Olivia Harrison, Harrison's wife, remembered that McCartney owned a villa in Los Angeles, which she immediately offered to her. His wife and son Danny, who assisted him in completing some professional projects, were with him until his death on November 28, 2001. He kept a sense of humor that was not always publicly recognized until his last breath and in the intimacy of the moment. Number 3. The Solitary Man. Harrison was the first to release a solo album, the first to reach the top of the charts, the first to embark on a solo tour, the first to experiment with fusions with music from other regions, precocious world music, the first to succeed in film production, and the creator of benefit concerts. However, all of this did not occur as a result of his desire to be the first to outperform the others. There was no vocation, no eagerness of the pioneer in Harrison, but rather the putting into practice of free spirit, of someone who allowed himself to think outside conventional structures and move towards what he truly desired. Number 4. Gentleman. Harrison was a gentleman from a different era. Even though his wife, Pattie Boyd, was having an affair with his best friend, Eric Clapton, and was outraged by the news, George chose to divorce her so that Eric could marry her. Furthermore, he attended the wedding and performed with Paul and Ringo. John was on vacation and could not attend. When asked how he felt about it, he replied, "I'd rather she be with him than with any idiot." Number 5. A versatile musician converted to Hinduism. Despite not knowing how to read music, he was able to master more than 25 musical instruments. Although the guitar was George's primary instrument, he also played the sitar, bass, ukulele, mandolin, fiddle, tambura, dobra, swarmandal, an Indian harp, tabla, organ, piano, the Moog synthesizer, the harmonica, autoharp, glockenspiel, vibraphone, xylophone, clave, congas, and the jal tarang, a Hindu instrument made up of ceramic. And it is that, musically speaking, the youngest member of the band was the most inclined to experiment with the group's sound, which was a significant criterion when approaching the production of the records. In 1965, George met sitarist Ravi Shankar and was so taken with his talent that he moved to India to learn more about the sitar for over a month. This instrument's influence can be seen in songs like Norwegian Wood from the album Rubber Soul. Despite Ravi's Hindu influence on Harrison, he was the only one who embraced this doctrine by working on spirituality until the day he died. The remaining components walked on tiptoe through this way of life. When the guitarist died, it was widely assumed that his ashes were scattered in a private ceremony in the Ganges and Yamuna rivers, though the family never confirmed this. Number 6. He was the youngest of the Fantastic Four. That age difference remained a psychological barrier throughout the quartet's entire career. When they were still a quintet with Stu Sutcliffe and Pete Best, but no Ringo Starr on drums, George would hide in a corner when the police came by every night, fearing he would be deported because he was a minor. Those days in Germany provided the group with a workout and a sense of cohesion that helped solidify them. Every night of the week, they spent 6 hours a day in front of the public, giving them the tools of the trade. The rest was a rare combination of genius and understanding an era. Number 7. He had sex when he was 17 years old for the first time. Harrison introduced a new slang term to the English language during the height of Beatlemania. In the 1964 film A Hard Day's Night, Harrison uses the word grotty. This slang is a shortened version of the word grotesque, which Harrison used to criticize clothing. Much to Harrison's chagrin, John Lennon claimed that Harrison cringed whenever he had to say it in the film. His phrase caught on and is still used on occasion today. They spoke of those early days performing in Hamburg when the Beatles were constantly playing in the local bars. When Harrison finished, John, Paul, and Pete Best clapped loudly. It's worth noting that Harrison and the rest of the Beatles made so little money from this venture that they all shared the same small room, sleeping in bunk beds. This was made even more awkward when Harrison, then 17, lost his virginity to a German prostitute with whom he ended up having sexual relations, while the other Beatles slept in bunk beds next to him. Harrison once stated that he was unaware of the presence of the others, who appeared to be silent and looking away during the act, but clapped and clapped after Harrison finished. Number 8. Green Friend. Harrison became a vegetarian at the age of 22, before it was fashionable, and stayed that way until the end of his life. He forbade the consumption of meat or fish in his home. Gardening was also one of his favorite pastimes. He once claimed to have planted around 10,000 trees on all of his properties during his existence. Not to mention how many times he was arrested for having large amounts of marijuana in his possession. Number 9. The Pessimistic. The first song he composed on his own that appeared on a Beatles album was Don't Bother Me, which was the complete opposite of the complacent songs of Paul and John. With the fans, Harrison hurriedly wrote the song. After all, he was sick with the flu and fever because he didn't want to see anyone or be bothered, though he later adapted the lyrics to a romantic context to avoid clashing with them. He also complained bitterly about not having more of his songs on the band's album in the theme of Only a Northern Song, considered for Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, criticizing Paul and John and their publishing company. Of course, the song was left off the album and later appeared on the soundtrack to the film Yellow Submarine. Number 10. A religious young man who is also a poor student. Harrison bought his first guitar when he was 12 years old while recovering from nephritis. It was an Eggman that he paid £3 for. During his adolescence, the musician had an unusual appearance, long hair combed like a wig, which set him apart from the other boys his age to the point where they referred to him as the boy with the turban. George was a rebellious young man who followed the parameters of the teddy boy fashion, a subculture associated with rock that developed in England in the 1950s. The adolescent's rebellious attitude, supported by his mother, was also carried over to the academic level, to the point where, in response to George's apathy, some teachers allowed him to sleep during class time. Harrison attended the same school as Paul McCartney, a class above him, but they met on the bus and quickly discovered that music, and Elvis, brought them together. And that brings us to the end of our list. What do you think of these facts? And do you know any others that we didn't include? You can share it in the comment section below. And don't forget to click the notification bell to stay up to date.